And a warm welcome to our third in our series of community learning talks on the Windrush Generations. When I say generations, as it's often we focus on our first generation, our elders, because of COVID. And the elders, we decided to focus on the generations, the descendants of Windrush Generation, and also its influence, as we heard from Dr. Manuel Duque last time, and also Carol Williams. I'm delighted on this, our third talk, to have with me the Mayor of Bristol, Marvin Rees, and ask him to join us and give us a few introductions shortly. Let me outline the project, as I see some new names and some esteemed names as well. It's born from the community, from ideas of talking to community members. There's so many great leaders and inspirations in a variety of projects, delivering we've got our food, our filmmakers and camera makers today, inspiring leaders, business people, carnival to celebrate as well, our artists, our activists, politicians across a variety of the Windrush generation that we've given to Bristol and Britain, not only from the Bristol bus boycott, but much beyond. And in our talks with Yui, working with Alicia and Mian, we talked to people like Ruth Pitter in the past, and said it'd be great to just kind of get this focus. So I'm delighted that those two have been instrumental, along with my Creative Connex team, in getting this off the ground, and giving really community leaders the platform and knowledge to share their knowledge with younger people, younger audiences, and that we've had, and working with people like Charlotte, and previously with UWE journalism. They've loved that Windrush story. They've loved hearing about St. Paul's Carnival. They've loved their visits to Malcolm X, and recorded them and made podcasts about them in their learning. So what we want to do, in a true sense of inclusive learning, is give that opportunity to both community members and to University West of England Bristol students, by sharing that with you today and beyond. And obviously in this momentous week, we're going to talk about a race, and we've seen more of our University West of England Bristol staff members, Dr. Sean Sobers and also Vernon, on that documentary as well. So filmmaking is very much a part of that. And also last week, Dr. Sean was speaking, thanks to the great work from Mian, brought Vanley Burke, one of the great photographers, the boy on the bike photograph from Handsworth. Still, it reminds me of that those tomahawk handlebars, well before Marvin's time, well before Adam's time. I'm the old man here, but people like Sherry will remember those tomahawks and chippers and choppers bikes that we're talking about. That Vanley Burke photograph, really, the beam and smile, really brought memories. It's great seeing his recollections and superb work for our students there to connect, and our community members are wide open. So there is the background to the project, what we want at the end of it. We're already getting being inundated with poetry connections and film connections. It's been great. Connected my A team together to get that. We'll have an exhibition on Windrush Day on the 22nd of June 2021. Sorry about the typo there. Great that some of my team members are there today. I've been dying to get the next gentleman who will give us introductory talk there. A man, obviously, whose heritage is steeped in Windrush traditions. His name is the Mayor of Bristol, Marvin Rees, and he's had that special connection through Windrush for not only his heritage, but he credits it into both his activism and his life as well, and also as a politician. So here to give in his own special words, and Liam, thank you very much, first of all, Marvin, for agreeing. And finally getting a date. Your commitment has never been in doubt. It's just about getting a correct date, and your continuing commitment to University West of England Bristol and the community. Welcome, please, the Mayor of Bristol to talk about the Windrush project, Marvin Rees.
Hi, Roger. You're okay? I can't see myself on the screen. Am I visible?
You are very visible.
There's nothing I'm supposed to push. Okay. So I've been told 5 minutes, so I'll keep that tight. So 3 questions I had was, one was the influence of Windrush Generations on me, something about my lived experience in the area as well, and about the global impact. So there are 3 things I pick out about the Windrush influence on me. First off, I was born in 1972. My dad came from Jamaica as a 12-year-old in the 60s. My mum is white, English, Welsh heritage. And so I come in 1972. I guess the impact of that Windrush is very early doors, as I do share that when my mum went to see the health visitor, a white woman, unmarried, no money, brown baby, she was told the best thing would be to do was have me aborted. Right? This is the culture of the time. My life was not worth living. But also, there's also implications for the judgments on her as a white woman who had a black partner. And she will say that all the assumptions of what those women were like, the way they were looked down on, were incredibly strong. And I grew up within that context. So the way I see the world is clearly informed by those early experiences of the way I think people perceive me and the value or the non-value of my life. That in and of itself has turned into my motivation. I've been talking to someone recently about a book, and what I'm realizing is I've said that actually I think my politics is more about attitude than ideology. Now, that doesn't mean I'm ideology free. Right? I'm left of centre. I'm progressive. I believe that government should intervene. I don't think we should be left up to markets alone. But there is no theological checklist of beliefs. Right? It's the world is unfair. There's incredible injustice. Let's get on and tackle it. Right? And by the way, one of my attitudes comes over that some of the people on the left of politics can also be the channels of racism and hierarchy and privilege without even realizing it. You don't get a pass just because you sit at the right point on the political spectrum, or what you think is the right point. And also that this Windrush, the historical injustices did not happen in a historical abstract. They are still with us today. We live in one of the most socially immobile countries in OECD, right? You see all the data that tells us that. So by definition, if you're socially immobile, historical injustices are still having implications today, because the circumstances of your birth determine your life chances, wealth, health, likelihood of poverty, likelihood of ending up in the criminal justice system. So if these injustices have been done to your parents and your grandparents, they're likely to be in your life too, because our society is socially immobile. So that's and all my sense of pushing against those forces are deep within me. In terms of how they played themselves out, in terms of the life of Bristol's Caribbean community through the generations, my perspective is, again, in thinking back to my mum's experience, when she had me, she struggled to find anywhere to live. My mum lived on City Road, where a lot of people who came from the Caribbean lived. My mum would tell very, kind of, life was tough, but also uplifting. People living on those houses when they were subdivided, and 3 or 4 families living in one house, different families on a floor, sharing a bathroom, doing communal cooking, doors unlocked. But remember that housing choice was because the city was hostile to her as she was, and she couldn't find somewhere. As a kid growing up, and this is when I lived downstairs from Roger in North Weston, as a 4 or 5-year-old living in North Weston, I was called Blackie Sambo every day. I didn't even know what the kids were about, but I would go home and say, Mum, they call me Blackie Sambo. And so my mum had to help me as a young brown kid, the only kid in my school that wasn't white, help me navigate that. Now, I was reasonably athletic, so I got away with a bit, but the older kids would do that, and I was acutely aware of my difference from a very early age. Let me jump forward in the name of time to living in Easton, where we moved to in 78. Let me just say that's about growing up in Bristol in the 1980s, right? And I say to people, it was growing up was navigating the city in a very physical sense, right? There was physical threat to me and my peers if you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. We didn't even ever give this a second thought. It was just the way it was, 1980s. So I've been chased down the street with all my friends where people wanted to put us in hospital. It happened on St. Mary Redcliffe dual carriageway. We were about 16, some pub men about twice the number of us, and they were men, chasing us down the street, calling us all N this and N that, and chasing us, and we outran them. You know, it was not unusual for people to drive past our school when we were outside the gates and shout out, "Oh, you coons, you this, that, and the other, go back to your own country." This was normal for us, and your sense of self, your sense of what you're about, plays itself out in that. I also come out of an education system that my friend's brother said the other day, if you made it out of our school, you did well. You're remarkable. I got to university and I realized that, you know, I grew up with kids who were smart, able, but they were on a conveyor belt that didn't take them to university. In fact, the first in my family to go, I met lazier, more violent drunkards at my university than I ever grew up with, right? People in my rugby club. And I thought my friends should be here, and they weren't, because they weren't on the right conveyor belt. So you can see all these things just swirl around in me, and as to about what it means to be of the Windrush heritage, what it means to be black, what it means to be a member of the working class, you know, in the country. What I would say is none of us want these kind of challenges at the time. I say this to young people when I speak, but if you can come through them, if you can overcome them, your ability to overcome these challenges became a source of incredible strength. Because one of the points I make, I joke with a friend of mine, Obi, about our time at university, that when I was with the posh kids, and I used to feel inferior to them because they had cars and money and went to private school and everything. And I should have said, well, listen, what university are you at? How much did your education cost? Well, mine was free, and we're at the same university. So pound for pound, skill for skill, hour for hours, your parents must be gutted, right? Because they paid you to be at a better university than me. We're the same one. So yeah, that experience, it was a very challenging Bristol to go up in. And I'll cut it short here, Roger. But I mean, the legacy of this, and I think the resilience we've had to show, is evident in the disproportionate presence of the Caribbean, whether it be in music, sport, and culture. I think the area we need to unlock fully is the economic presence as well. People don't mind us singing and dancing, right? But what we got to do is think about political and economic power as well, picking up and I think that for me that goes across issues of race and class. It's about the restructuring of our economy.
Marvin, you've still got a few. I mean, we can go through a few minutes. Far bit for me to cut you short. I was just told that you didn't have a great deal of time, so we can go through a few more minutes, because some of those it's very interesting. You use the word physical, and it's I haven't kind of framed it in that sense before. It's a very obviously a very violent threat from the 80s with skinheads arresting people. It wasn't the skinheads, and it was the police as well in those times. But it was, and I obviously was I like into an era. We're going to come to this with two of the next generation down, if you like. Marvin, you're somewhere in the middle, but the use of camera phones has changed all that. Violence, random violence, can take place just about anywhere, and did. And also just realizing, because you mentioned it, and obviously we've been a family friend of our mother. We must have been one of the first black families that you saw, because we lived directly above you, because we were surrounded in the sea of white faces down in Humberston Walk and Arts Western.
Yeah, and I have very nostalgic memories of being down in Arts Western as well, actually. So while there was real challenge, and part of that challenge was about race, part of it was about the isolation that everyone, I think, on that estate felt, wasn't it? We're on the edge of the city. The bus service wasn't great. Number 22 or number 23, if you remember, Roger, used to come into town, used to take me to my nan. So there was a whole bunch of things going on that made life challenging, but still at the same time, climbing on the garages and going into the fields behind the flats, I have good memories of that, and I had some really good school friends. But it really was coming into when I became of age, as it were, when you become about 11, 12, and people maybe begin to see you as a legitimate target or perceive you as a threat, that the physicality of racial tension, put it that way, become very real, and we had to learn to manage that fast. So for example, we would never be in the city centre as 14, 15-year-olds. We would never be in the city centre come dark after 6, 7 o'clock on a Saturday. You just wouldn't do it. right? Because we would not go to the far side of the city centre, as it were. We just would not do it. Even when we started to go to nightclubs at 17, 18 years old, we didn't go to nightclubs that were around the city centre. We went to nightclubs at the top of Park Street, right? It was Moon Club, which is now Lakota, or it was Vadim's at the top of Park Street, because we knew that those were places where black people could go and feel safe, but also not be perceived as a threat by the bouncers, because they often wouldn't let groups of black kids in, right? So, and that was known too. There was a likelihood you would not be allowed into these venues. So it was just the way the world, the way it was.
Yeah, very much more. That's why you made it to mayor, because you were far more sensible. We were in Romeo and Juliet's in the studios and still getting our head kicked in and still going back for more, because the dancing and the other accompaniments that were in there were too much to refuse. But moving across from there, I want to just press you on the final point, really, in terms of making that business value, because we talk about the influence of Windrush. We've certainly done that with sport and music and entertainment, as you mentioned. We're going to obviously cover that with Michael and Adam. But I just wanted to, just in terms of that you know, that's it's seen as being a kind of white thing, but that economic value, as we know from our black activists active in the city, has been there from another of the kind of Windrush generation, passed down to Malcolm X, Black Star Liner, all that black economics, and we've even for all of that, we've yet to capture that those great words. What's your view in terms of how that kind of we change that narrative?
Well, I think so on a number of levels here. First, there's a piece within the community actually, and it's something I've pointed out recently. You know, no one's going to dance their way to liberty and equality, and I think that actually in our own activism, as it were, there's been an emphasis on culture, and that's important. But sometimes culture to the exclusion of politics and economics, and then amongst black people, there's also been there's been a tendency to look with an eye of suspicion upon anyone from the community that dares to foray into public leadership. Yes. And I've been on the receiving end of that. And actually someone who knew my dad from before I was born, his first point to me was, well, now you got elected, Marvin, I have to keep you, make sure you don't sell out. I said, why is your first words to me now, Marvin, you've entered into a really tough world. How can I support you? Why are you starting going to sell out? And it's that kind of subtle internal lack of support system has really undermined, I think, the effort over, our efforts over decades, right? Because it chips away. You go and get public leadership, somehow you're not of the people anymore. And I've been on the receiving end of that. Ash has been on the receiving end of that. But it's not just in politics. You have as well. Anyone who steps up, and that's a real shame. So there's that kind of parable, isn't it, about the crab? You know, the pit's in hell, and there's a devil over every pit, and every time someone tries to climb out, the devil pokes him with a fork and forces them to go back in, and there's a pit with no devil. It's done by nationality and ethnic group, but I won't. And someone says, why is there no devil in that pit? And they said, well, because every time someone tries to get out, someone pulls them back in. You know, and we've done some of that to ourselves, if we're perfectly frank about it. And that's undermined us. But secondly, I think there is, and African Americans are particularly pronounced on this as well, recognizing that singing and sports are massively important, right? I'm a big fan of, I love the Jack Johnson story, and obviously you've got people like Muhammad Ali done that as well. They can be pathways out of poverty that allow people to feed back in. Jay-Z, you think, building his empire and so forth. That's massively important, right? But what a number of those that have been very good have done is then switch that into real business, right? Shaq has done that incredibly well, switching into real economic presence. Chris Rock makes a point, doesn't he? There's a difference between rich and being wealthy. He said Shaq is rich. The person that owns the LA Lakers is wealthy, right? You got to be the person that owns the team, not just the person that gets the wages. And that ownership of assets, of land, of wealth generation that then gets passed on generation to generation is something that has not necessarily taken root in the community in the way that those communities that go on to escape or to somewhat escape poverty have managed to do. And I think that has to be a real focus. But I just want to say, for tweet's sake, because you've got to be careful, this is not, to me, this is a conversation that crosses, that sits at the interplay between race and class. This is not about black people being in competition with the poorest white people. This is something that this drive for social mobility is something that sits at the heart of an economy that has left millions of people behind and amassed wealth in the hands of fewer and fewer super rich people that are racing off over the hill. So it's an economy that you cannot tackle issues of racism unless you tackle issues of social immobility and poverty in general that clearly cross racial and ethnic boundaries.
Excellent. We could certainly take more on that Windrush legacy, because we didn't inherit all of that stuff, and we certainly didn't, didn't learn how to kind of nurture that like our African American cousins. But that's excellent, Marvin. We'll call you back, I think, to get some more kind of input. You've mentioned about sport. We've got, and I talked about Vernon at the top of the piece. He is one of our guest speakers later on. He's a former Olympic triple jumper, made it into business, and of course running his own gospel choir. And neatly segueing from African Americans and entertainment and owners who have made that, we in the news this week, Tyler Perry. He says, I can remember a few things from my radio links. Of course, giving sanctuary to members of the royal family of all people, which brings nicely into two aspiring Tyler Perrys in terms of wanting to get their network up and running through their various productions. First on that list is Mr. Mike Jenkins, who's just starting his Black Wave productions. Thank you very much, Marvin. By the way, do stay in touch, and feel free to stay on as well. Round of applause from everybody coming through. I can see on my chat for your inspiring words. But it's to Michael we turn. His work there. He's now turned to Black Wave. I know him from his previous projects and working with Channel 4, working with a community, the Stop and Search videos that we first worked on. We worked on from dub to dubstep, and now he's gone on to kind of greater things there. Here to talk about the influence of Windrush with him, his filmmaking and making it. Please welcome Michael Jenkins from Black Wave, and the floor is yours to talk about all those great things, Michael.
Thank you, Roger. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, can I be heard? Nice one.
Loud and clear. Thank you very much.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Roger. And yeah, big up to Marvin as well. Really inspirational person in Bristol. It's just, it's really, I just love listening to Marvin and listening to him tell his story, because it is so sort of inspirational and aspirational. So yeah, thanks for that, Marvin. But yeah, well, thanks for inviting me to this, Roger. I think I think this is, something really important as far as like looking at, the Windrush generation and the legacy that the Windrush generation have left. It's so profound, but it's one of those hidden sort of stories which isn't part of the national dialogue. And, so I mean, a bit about me, I'm a filmmaker born in Bristol, born in Southmead. I actually ended up growing up in Bath. My parents moved to Bath from Southmead, and they left Southmead because of all the, I think my dad's van got burnt out. I mean, there was lots of sort of overt racism in your face, and I remember them telling me that it wasn't a nice place, and that's why they wanted to move away. So luckily they got a house swap and moved to Bath. And I'll never forget sort of growing up in Bath. People, when I was really young, I was probably about 7 or something like that, and somebody told me to F off back to where I come from. I initially thought they were talking about Bristol. That's what I initially thought, because I thought, okay, they're telling me to go back to Bristol. And as I got older, I understood that they actually meant to go back to Africa. Yeah, I think so from young I've sort of had an understanding of that difference. And my grandparents, my grandparents on my mum's side are from Dominica, which is a small island, one of the small islands in the Caribbean. So it's not the Dominican Republic, which a lot of people get confused with. And my dad is a mixed race, and what his mum is from the UK, and his father's from Jamaica. So having that sort of Caribbean mix with my grandparents, You know, I grew up with the heavy Dominican influence, and I think, you know, growing up in school, I didn't really get on with school because I had this sort of relationship where they weren't telling it, nothing represented me, nothing represented my mum, nothing represented, you know, anything. We weren't taught anything when it came to the Windrush generation, when it came to the black contribution to society. Obviously the only thing we were taught about was slavery, and very, you know, selective education about that as well. So I've always been very passionate about learning and understanding, you know, these hidden stories and these hidden histories, basically. I've always been passionate about it, and I love film. I love filmmaking. I didn't, you know, I dropped out of college. I didn't get any formal training when it came to filmmaking. I was into music, so I was doing music videos, and I learned, you know, how to make films by watching films, and, you know, watching lots of YouTube tutorials to learn how to make films. And I obviously grew up hating TV. You know, I hated because it wasn't representative. So I grew up hating TV the same way I grew up, you know, disliking the education system. It's the same reason, you know, I grew up disliking the media because everything that I saw was always negative. It was either drugs, it was either crime, and that was it. You know, it wasn't really, you know, and then obviously apart from, you know, sports and music, that's the only other way that you'd get, you know, anything when it came to sort of black culture or black presence in the UK. So yeah, I mean, I've, you know, grew up in a household where I was taught a lot of things, especially through things like reggae music. I was taught about my culture and my heritage and history, and, you know, reggae music was a big key factor in that. And, you know, I think my first sort of revelation, understanding about the contribution that people from the Windrush generation and onwards have done to the UK was when I was doing the project with Ujima, with Roger, called Dubplate to Dubstep, and really getting that full understanding of how the sound of the UK changed because of that migration from those people from the Caribbean, from Jamaica. The whole, the physical, the actual, there was bass in the UK from that time. And learning about the Shebeens and learning about their elders not being able to go into the town centre for fear of attack and, you know, the racial abuse. But then really understanding how the music itself throughout the years, you know, from dubs, you know, all the way to reggae, and then to you know, ska music, all the way up to today's music, and how like the influence of the Windrush generation had on the shaping and the very sound of this country is something that is just, it's a travesty that hasn't been told. So I was honored to be able to make a documentary for Ujima, which basically told that story in about 20 minutes, you know. So yeah, that's sort of my I guess that's my relationship with trying to put out, you know, as a filmmaker, I want to tell sort of untold stories and those unheard narratives. And, you know, very much so the stuff around the Windrush generation and the legacy is something that's really close to my heart and something I hold dear. Yeah, and I know, Roger, I don't know if you wanted to ask me any questions around that, but I could move on to sort of where I'm at now and what I'm doing as far as film and TV production.
Yeah, I wanted to just because we the influence is a wide net and term from Windrush as a learning point. But something that you said that really kind of interested me in terms of your literally on the job training. Started with Dubplate to Dubstep, but also I mentioned about Stop and Search film, but you also it was great from the community in Bristol, a little bit in Bath as well, where you live. Is that you would have been making community-based films. So when you would have learned from, you'd have known about Stop and Search, but you actually got to interview a local community member with lived experience, and that would have been helpful in your education to formulate the films and you know, because you know you're that activist artist kind of scenario. I just wanted to just talk a little bit about that and that community influence that Bristol gave you from all its communities, including, of course, the Black Bristol population.
Yeah, of course. I mean, not really having any understanding of filmmaking, um, and also sort of wanting to find answers, I guess. I've always growing up since a child, I've always wanted to find answers to things, especially when it came to Black history. As soon as I understood that history, I always wanted to find out and learn more. And I love as a filmmaker, I love talking to people. I love interacting with people. That's why this lockdown has been quite hard on me, because I like being around people and learning from people's stories and learning people's experiences. And I had made a conscious decision when I set up my first company, 8 Cents Media, to really document and capture some of these stories that I knew were there, but I didn't see them on the mainstream channels. So I would interview the elders. I would be interviewing Roy Hackett and Paul Stevenson and Barbara Detrin and the elders to learn, Ajax as well. I mean, just to learn, the stories and capture them, because I understood that, eventually if nobody's going to do it, then all these stories are going to die out, and the next generation will never have that understanding about the struggle that the elders faced. So, working within the community, being part of the community, and people trusting me to film them and not feel like I'm there to exploit them, which is what's happened with a lot of TV companies coming into the Black community, interviewing people. People have never always been happy, and that's because a lot of the reasons why they're coming into interviewing people in the community is it's all it's negative stories, and there's nothing just about I want to learn about the Shebeens. I want to learn about what it was like, growing up when the elders first came here, and St. Paul's was a ruin, was like a shanty town. I want to know about what was it like, and there's little gems that they give you, which from the elders, which is why it's so important that we have that connection with our elders, and we definitely document what their experiences and their stories, because it's part of our general story. And I feel like with this whole scandal, with the Windrush scandal, I think it's emphasized even more the fact that our stories haven't been told all throughout this time that we've been here en masse. Our story hasn't been told, and it just, speaking with the elders in the community, it does drive me to want to tell more of these stories.
Great. Thank you very for that. Let me, before we pull you to your kind of present projects, I know we've got a big contingent from the film group, and thank you so much to the team and everybody on the film side for getting that through. But it was something, and when I say about talking to community members who've helped me with this project, and you're one of those people. And it's something that's still kind of painful for me. It's something we've talked about, discussed. Is that Marvin touched upon it? Is that we don't have anything. When you came, you said you wanted to make films and put them up for free to tell that story, and this is part of that. In that generations of the next generations and other communities and our wider communities and our white and brown and Black communities coming into it. So that helped to formulate it. So it's through the generations we learn from each other. The image on my front of my book from the Windrush in the White House, I had to pay £100 for. That wasn't. I couldn't say, Mike, we've got that image from Windrush. You can let me have, and I'll do it. There was no barring system between you and I. I had to say that, and they must be making a min. And that always stuck with me. And it hurts. And obviously, we're doing more in the Bristol Records office. But you've given loads to that in terms of the archive and that mentality of keeping stuff. That's what I've really admired about your work. And just speak a little bit about that before we move to your current project, please.
Yeah, I mean, I've always, when I started this journey of making films, obviously I wanted to see what other films were created about, my people. Them, I wanted to know like was there any sort of other documentation, and it was hardly. There was nothing really there. There's not really anywhere you can go to, which is one place where you can find this archive or view this archive. And then sort of talking with people in the community, it just made me understand that what is very expensive back in the 80s, the 60s, 70s, 80s to actually to film and to record things, and a lot of people wouldn't have been able to afford that, so they wouldn't have had that resource, so they wouldn't have been able to document stuff themselves. And because of the sort of the racism within the media, they weren't really coming to the community to get those types of stories. They were only interested in the stories that you know, would sell papers, or you know, that had crime to do with it, or anything around that. So nobody, what I understood is that, well, there wasn't really any archive. There isn't any archive. So I did sort of, you know, at the beginning, I was just filming things because I felt like, well, somebody needs to just document this, because it will be something that we could reference in the future, because I haven't got anything. You know, somebody in 50 years time might want to know what was going on in the community, you know, in 2013 or whatever. And now that there's some sort of resource for them to be able to, you know, to access one day when I collate that resource, you know. And it's just something that's missing, that I always thought that's something that's really needed. And yeah.
Does that include your children in terms of them learning?
Oh yeah, of course, you know. I mean, it's got to be, you know, this is what archive does. This is what film does. Film is, you know, documentary film is an amazing sort of tool, because of, and film in general, you know, once you commit something to film, it's there forever, and it helps to give you a real insight and feeling for the time. And you know, our Holocaust wasn't captured on film. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like we need to now that, you know, photography and film has become a bit more democratized because it's a lot cheaper, anybody can do it. You know, we need to make sure we utilize this to create content that the future generations can have a better understanding of, as things die out and change and get gentrified.
Absolutely, that film is so important. Again, especially from not formal education, I think of Babylon, and I think of the films of Spike Lee, from Do the Right Thing, right through from When the Leaves Broke, For Little Girls. They were educational blocks in my education of culture, and that's why culture is so important. So we're gonna kind of move tack through the history to present day. Tell us about Black Wave, but you take this however you want to go through the growth of 8 Sense Media and the films you've made, and your work with Dr. Mila Thumbo, who I would add is connections to, and we're going to be proud of that, as an honorary doctorate from University of West of England, Bristol. So the connection's still there, very much so. Over to you, Mike, to talk about your current projects and engaging in the film.
Great, thanks, Roger. Yeah, so I mean, I started 8 Sense Media in 2012 with the help of the Prince's Trust, who I won a loan from to start up the business. And within those 8 years, I learned everything, you know, about making films, you know, music videos, TV productions, art films. You know, we've done a lot of work with Calling the Shots, another amazing Bristol film company. And with them, you know, I delivered a whole load of films for the Random Acts strand of Channel 4, and also for BBC New Creatives, which is for BBC Arts. So that is 8 Sense Media. And then last year, late 2019, there was all this chat about, as there has been for maybe the last 18 months, about diversity in the media sector, diversity in film and TV. And you know, I heard that Bristol was bidding for this, for Channel 4 to come to the city. And this is when they announced that Channel 4 were moving out of London. And I thought, you know, and you know, I was being, obviously I'd known Marvin for years now. I interviewed Marvin years ago by the railway steps in Easton for that Stop and Search documentary that I did for the police. And Marvin invited me to some of these meetings, these roundtable meetings that he had with you know, all the sort of big production companies in Bristol. And I just noticed that the only people of colour in the room were me and Marvin, you know. And I felt like, okay, there's something not right here. There's something that needs to change. And you know, this is the reason why, you know, the TV and the film industry is not necessarily representative, because there's nobody within the media TV industries that, you know, own these production companies that are pitching to commissioners. So, you know, I sat down, two wonderful ladies from Drummer TV, sat me and Mina down and got us together and asked us, what do you think about, you know, creating something? So Mina and I went off and spoke about it, and yeah, we decided, you know, that it was time to create a production company which is Black owned and Black led, and that will be there to tell these stories that everybody wants, but nobody can really tell because it's not really coming from an authentic place. So that's why we felt like it was important to start Black Wave. So we launched last year. We started trading in January 2020, and you know, we had the support from Marvin, which was amazing, and you know, Drummer TV, which was really great. And yeah, we started last year, and we got a few commissions under our belt already, which has been fantastic. And Dr. Mina Fomba, and I just took that same ethos from 8 Sense Media into Black Wave. Like, we're here to tell untold stories and hear from unheard voices, and that is what, you know, essentially what we're all about. So that is Black Wave, which is by Dr. Mina Fomba and I. Tom, if you can just show that picture, the one with yeah, that's it. Yeah, great. So yeah, so you could find us, you know, Black. So it's Black without the C, Wave Pro on all the social medias there, for future reference. And yeah, so Tom, if you can just pull up the next picture, because I'll just round this up with the other project that I'm working on. So if they put up one of the orange slides. So this is the Bristol. So obviously, Mina and I have come together as filmmakers. We want to make films. We want to change the narrative. We want to, you know, revolutionize the TV and film industry. That's, you know, that's our hope. And, you know, hopefully we'll be able to do something. But we also, you know, being in the city and working with lots of different organizations and speaking with lots of different people, understand that, you know, there is something also else that's missing. So we came up with the idea of the Bristol African Caribbean Culture Space. We came up with this last year, but we actually decided to launch it when the Colston statue was toppled, because where they chucked the Colston statue was exactly where we planned to have this space. So what the Bristol African Caribbean Culture Space is an art space which is located on a boat in the center of the city, Bristol's historic harbour. So because these waters have such a deep significance for people of the African descent, we feel like it would be perfect to have a space which doesn't exist in the city at the moment, a space of excellence, a space for the arts, but also a space to memorialize Bristol's, you know, troubled history when it comes to the transatlantic slave trade, because there isn't really anything that's big and physical where everyday people can come in and learn about the history, number one, but also experience and understand Black culture and, you know, Black people from across the diaspora. So so this is what we launched last year in June, and this is yeah, a Black art space on a barge which is going to be located in the historic harbour. So that's sort of what we're up to, making films on one side, and the other side is trying to build a space for Black artists to thrive and, you know, to showcase their work, but somewhere that's in the centre of town, in that body of water which has such historical significance for us, but also, you know, in between the watershed, the Arnolfini, the M shed, in between the sort of the cultural sort of centre of the city. We feel like, you know, it could not only be like a landmark for the city, but a way of addressing its history that the city hasn't really addressed ever.
I've got plenty of questions, but I think I've spoken enough. I'm going to open the floor up now for some questions. Please, you heard then about Michael's journey, his journey from film, not classically trained pianist, as many of us aren't, learned on the job, from the born from the community, and giving back to the community from there. You heard about his encounters of racism there, and that familiar tale, which is why those words when the orange agent of President Trump said them. We all felt that throughout the diaspora, shuddered that. We've all had that that moment. You've heard about his filmwork and his contribution to the Black experience in Bristol and that archive, which is a paucity for all of our contributions, nothing there, and that commitment to changing that narrative. And now through community projects from GEMA and Stop and Search and many other community, St. Paul's Carnival, he's far too modest. There's loads of documentaries that he's been engaged with, as well as just turning up with the camera and just being there and being present. Weddings and funerals, and I'm sure there's the odd bar mitzvah been thrown in then, as well as legendary trips to places like Bamboo Club and Ajax. So there's plenty there to kind of ask as he now moves into the new waters, excuse the pun, of Black Wave, and moving into that with Dr. Mina Fombo and been one project from 8 Cents Mina born into the next bigger one there, which is opening doors throughout the UK and the globe. So let's have your questions. Charlotte, you're going to be, I'm sure you can lead the way on behalf of some of the students. I know that you were so keen to come along today. Charlotte Crofts, I wonder if you can just present the first question, please.
So we've got amazing students, and they're all really agitating for us to address our curriculum and decolonise it and all this kind of stuff, which we are really engaged with. And one of the things that we're worried about is the lack of people from diverse backgrounds who are actually applying. And it was interesting to hear you, Michael, talk about the fact that you've kind of you're self-taught, you didn't go to university, and obviously you don't need to go to university to become a filmmaker. But we really want to reach out to a broader constituency so that we can be part of this change making that needs to happen. And UE does all the right tick boxy things, but there's still not enough change. And this is also about gender as well as other kinds of diversity. How can we make people feel that we're a space that they want to come into and be part of this kind of change making? And obviously there's probably a financial thing now with student fees and the massive debt that people have to get. And I was really conscious of what Marvin said about those intersections between race and class and poverty and social mobility. But what can we be doing as a programme to encourage a greater diversity of people to come, and also when they come for them to feel safe and that they can be part of that change making?
For some reason, Mike, we've lost your sound.
Oh, can you hear me now? Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, Charlotte. I mean, that's that's a really deep question, and that's the question that everybody wants to know the answer to, and it's quite like
deep.
It's deep.
Work for your money.
There's so many different facets. So it's like, I don't know. When I think about why I didn't go to uni, I didn't go to uni because I think at that point it was like it was money, and it was I didn't want to the education itself. I didn't have a good interaction with secondary education. So by the time kids, if you have a bad experience or a negative experience of school from year 7 up until when you start not really caring about it, I think that is going to make you feel like, well, if this place is not for me, then why would I go into this? Why would I go into this place? So I did try college. I ended up going to I ended up trying 4 or 5 different colleges, and I dropped out of all of them because I felt like it was like the way the system was working, it just wasn't working for me. And the fact that there wasn't any I didn't have no black teachers when I was in school. I wasn't taught by one black person. So the racism I experienced at school, the sort of the way the curriculum was at school made me not want to engage in education because I knew that I wasn't being taught things. So I think I made my decision that I wasn't going to go to uni when I was really young, and I look back on this now because I think like, yeah, I should have probably went to uni because I'd have more contacts, I'd have more links, I would have known a lot more about the industry than sort of going through it and taking years to do it. I probably I would have done it in a term. I would have known certain things. So now in hindsight, I see the benefits of uni. But when I was younger, it was just like there's loads of different reasons why. Obviously, money is a big issue as well. But definitely like who you're seeing in the education system. Who are you being taught by? Who are you going to be taught by in uni? If you don't see yourself in the film industry, if you don't really understand all the different jobs that are involved in making films, then you're not going to see it as something for you. And I didn't really understand it. I knew about the cameraman, and obviously I knew about the director because one of my heroes was Spike Lee, because when I watched Malcolm X, that literally changed my whole life. When I was about 12, I watched that film, and that really changed my whole life. So, you know, I understood about the director, but I guess I had a bit more of an interest in film from that angle. I had a bit of an interest from the behind the scenes side of it. But yeah, that's a really, really difficult one, and I feel like, yeah, having more, you know, I was just saying about having, you know, role models. Mandy mentioned role models. I think that's really, you know, that's the first start, really, is to have role models, people that can represent the course, that look different, that might not be your typical, you know, UE student. I think that's really important. Sorry, that was long, but yeah.
No, that's fine. We can say we've got you singing for your supper, so that's great. And thanks for a great question from that. If you want to put some questions in the chat, that'd be great as well. Bring up Mike in more. Fine, we can certainly arrange that and get those speaking gigs in for you. And like I say, Mian says employ more Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, academic staff. I just wanted to talk about in terms of ideation and getting ideas for projects with the subject that matter. We've left it open in terms of Alicia, Mian, and I, in terms of the students' response. We're talking about film. How do you kind of go on your ideas to kind of get into action? I'm going to put that to Adam a bit later in terms of the camera, in terms of photography. But how do you kind of get your kind of narrative? Because you also write, by the way, you also produce, and you also mentioned your rapping skills as well. But the stable in the film genre. How do you kind of yeah? It's, as I always say, it's, you know, 10 seconds off the lips, 10 hours in production. How do you get from A to Z?
How do you get from A to Z, Roger? I think, you know, I've got literally hundreds of ideas, basically. So I'll never run out of an idea to do.
Use a storyboard. Do you write it down? What do you?
Yeah, once I've got an idea in my head, then yeah, the first thing I start doing is put pen to paper and start writing it down. You know, I like to use references. I like to use like stills from other films that I really like, and I really love the way that composition is there. Or genre, you know, I really love, you know, as a fan, I love the horror genre and the psychological thrillers and things like that. So, you know, I've always got ideas about, oh, imagine if I put this guy in this type of a person in this sort of a situation, what could happen? Then I might start, you know, plotting that out and, you know, looking at images, listening to music, soundtracks to get. I get, you know, music inspires me a lot to be creative. So I listen to a lot of soundtracks for movie scores, a lot of Bruce Lee soundtracks, some spaghetti westerns. But yeah, I love listening to music to get my ideas bubbling. And then it's just a case of, you know, understanding those three, you know, pre-production, production, and post-production. And I take the idea through those three stages. But, you know, pre-production is the most important. That's when, you know, so a good resource, I don't know if there's for the film students, is a site called Film Grab. So Film Grab, if you type that into Google, what that is that's a resource where it has loads of different shots from lots of different films, and I really like to use that to, when I'm just dumping like shot ideas and compositions, I just like to use that as a resource to pull from. But yeah, that's a bit about the process. But ideas, I've got ideas, you know, I love reading, I love history. There's so many ideas. I know a lot of people, a lot of interesting people, characters. There's so many documentary ideas, drama ideas that, you know, I'm not going to be alive long enough to tell all of them, basically. It's just, that's where I'm at, Roger.
Absolutely. I can't echo that more about history. For someone who hated history, now a historian, there's just so many strange facts that are out. I was watching because I'm writing a fiction book, and there's this about the stately home, and there was this duchess who who had a gambling addiction in the 16th century, and wrote her begging letters in her own blood. Again, you can't make that stuff up. You can take these narratives from history, as we've seen even in the last since the turn of the year. From the January 6th insurrection and our recent events with the royal family. Sophie Kirk and Jessie Lamworth ask, we want you to do some more talks as well. I want to just want to come to just the final point. We're going to have Adam shortly. Marvin has come back, and I think he might take one or two questions if it's there, and to continue the discussion as well. But the other thing is that we've talked about the use of the camera, we've talked about some of the tools, we've talked about the ideation project in terms of getting some of these things, but that's all well and good. What's daunting is the pitch. How do you handle that?
The pitch?
Yeah.
Wow. Hours of researching on how to pitch and try and condense it as small as possible. So if you can tell an idea in 30 seconds, that's good. Now try and tell it in 10 seconds. It's like, that's what I always try and do, to keep refining it, so that the crux of the story always comes through first. But pitching is like something I'm learning. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. What I've learning about the industry itself is that time is like being quite timely is important, because you could have the greatest idea in the world, but if it's not the right time to do it, it's just not going to get made, and that's just something you've got to understand and accept. So the pitch is a very tricky one, but I would say with the pitch, just get used to no, because I think regardless of how big you are, even some of the big production companies that I work with, they're pitching things all the time, and 90% of it is a no. Then with the other 10% of it, maybe 5% of them no's is like a maybe, which then turn into a no. And then, maybe 1 or 2% of their ideas actually get through. So it's like, it's a really tricky industry. It's a really tricky world to navigate when you want to get funding to make a film. It's very tricky. So there's lots of hoops and stuff to jump through when it comes to who you're getting funded by. That's why when I started 8 Sense Media, I was independent, because I was like, well, I've got a camera, I've got a computer, got a microphone, I can just make some stuff, and that's what I'm going to go do. Make some stuff, tell some stories.
That's excellent advice, and it's good to remember. I've listened to people like Spike Lee and Martin Scorsese, two directors I admire, and they've had trouble getting stuff produced. That's why they're at Netflix now, because mainstream, even turns their back on them. So imagine how hard it is to kind of cut through. So that's what we admire. So great advice there. So Michael, just final kind of closing comments in terms of Windrush family, your next project. You've got a job as well, I saw on Twitter. Have you got some opportunities within Black Wave as well?
Yes, we do. Yeah, we've just, it's really exciting. We're offering some opportunity. We're looking for a development producer to work with us over a fixed period of time. So that's really exciting. I'm going to share my Twitter link and my social media sort of links in the chat, so people can just follow, because we've got lots of things going on. I've just finished shooting a film for funded by the BFI. We shot that in lockdown. That was crazy, but I'm really excited about it. It's a magical realism film, all black cast. It's just like an amazing sort of, it's a story that I really wanted to tell, which looks at, another aspect of Caribbean culture, which doesn't really get talked about, which is 9 nights. So how we grieve and death, in the black community, in the Caribbean community, what does that look like? So I've dramatized, a 9-night ceremony, and I'm really excited to put this out over the next few months, because that's a really important piece for me when it comes to sort of telling different stories. And that's a drama. So that's like my first sort of drama, because I want to do more drama films and stuff. But yeah.
What was the short that you did? the short one that you have with community actors? First, an early one that you did back at
Oh,
8
the early
Cents.
one. Oh, okay. That was great. That was a project I did at the Malcolm X Centre. Yeah.
When is that hitting the feature films?
I don't know, Roger. I think for that one I had
Have you spoken to Idris? Get his number. You get that up. Green Door Productions. Get Grade Up.
Yeah. I mean, it's a journey, and I think you don't get into this journey. You don't really get into filmmaking to be super rich. It's not about that. It's about, for me, it's about telling stories. It's about sharing new stories with the world to hopefully try and change the world. I mean, when The Birth of a Nation was created, that I think over 20 million people signed up to join the KKK. Films can change the world. I fully believe that, and if I can make a film, that's my dream, is to make a film that will change the world for the better, not for the worse, for the better.
Well, Michael, on that note, we're going to close. I already think, in your library of films, we touched upon Grave. We talked about the community link projects from St. Paul's right the way through, as I say, to the Shebeens of Ajax and beyond, dubplate to dubstep. And obviously, including the recent fall of the Edward Colston statue in Monumental. There is a library of great work. We look forward to taking that forward and having those conversations with you later in the year of the Black Wave and the project on the City Harbour, which will just revitalise. It's just mind-blowing in terms of us of African heritage having a project on the waters, just really trying to shake things up. I'd love to Dr. Mina Fumbo from all of us as well. I know it's a great inspiration to us all. Michael Jenkins of Black Wave, director, and much more on community and activists. Thank you on behalf of University of West England, Bristol and Creative Connex.
Blessings.
Wonderful stuff there. Thanks very much. Adam, we still will keep you there, but the mayor has come back and wanted to just add in a few more words. Marvin, are you there?
I am.
Yes. Yeah.
I didn't come back in with a request. I'm just saying I was just got home, so I was available. That's all. It was just if you
no
needed
problem
me,
at
that's
all.
Yeah.
Just briefly, if you could just to stay on before we will go directly to Adam, but just in terms of cultural terms, because I know that that's been important in terms of the Channel 4 recently, which obviously the team that got that there, and you're in production now on the board of directors. How important is that in terms of Bristol, Britain's narrative, and that black experience there? I want to be directly on the spot with that one.
What, getting Channel 4 to Bristol?
The importance of culture and your commitment to it, which we've seen through Channel 4, and we've seen through you, obviously, being a director of the board, and much more in terms of supporting the community-based organisations in culture, but telling that different stories, be they from Southmead and the white experience, because I know that's high on your list, as well as all parts of our community.
Yeah, so it's big, but Michael's an example, and me and Michael joke because it was after I lost the election in 2012. Michael interviewed me, and it's just me and him sat on the edge of the railway path on a bar bench while he asked me about Stop and Search. And now he's got his own company, he's making films. And when Channel 4 were coming to Bristol, exploring, Michael, well, you as well, but Michael's one of the people we want them to meet to talk about local talent. So the cultural offer is important, but I said we've got to get it right, right? It's not just about on-screen talent. It's not just about, and I think some people in our community sometimes get seduced when someone writes a story about them and puts them on Points West or something like that. That ain't enough. It's about owning the IP. That's where it counts, when you own the product. And that's when you begin to get the genuine redistribution of wealth and power, and you're, independent. Well, it's not all about money, but, like I said, amassing wealth gives you a platform for broader community development. So when we bid for Channel 4, we were quite clear with them, and they will say actually it stood out. We weren't asking for Channel 4 at any cost. Our point was not, well, we want Channel 4 and then existing a very race and class segregated media sector then races off over the hills with all the benefits of that. We were saying, listen, Channel 4, you seem to have a commitment to inclusion. If you can come to the city and work with us to build more inclusion and opportunity in what is a sector of the economy that generates jobs and income, then we want you to come here. And on the flip side, we said to production companies in Bristol, we'll bid for Channel 4 if you work with us on make a commitment to being more inclusive, race, class, and rest in your companies. We got that marry, and it was the marry that Channel 4 believed. And so what we've not just got is a piece of ambition, but we've held with it that commitment to inclusion, which I think is really important. But people wouldn't have seen those behind the scenes conversations, obviously, but Michael was there for those.
Yeah, and the point I'm making is that diversity narrative is what definitely what attracted them and gave that edge. So when people talk about, when we spoke about earlier on about business and diversity message, you've been able to live through your ideals and sell that to Channel 4, and they've invested in the city that way. So this is good for business, not just a hearts and minds thing.
Exactly. And I mean, the evidence is clear, and I would suggest people do read. There's a very powerful report by McKinsey. It's called Diversity Matters. It's written quite a few years ago now, but McKinsey's a management consulting firm, a global company. It's not a bleeding heart kind of activist thing, but what they say is the evidence tells you that companies that have women in leadership positions contributing to their thinking are more likely to outperform the market. Companies that employ what they call in America minorities, again, are more likely to outperform their competitors in the market. So access to a diversity of thought is not just a nice to have, it's now an issue of key strategic importance. So when we talk about social mobility within Bristol, Michael coming through with his company, being part of the creative ecosystem, what that means for the city as a city is that we have a diversity of thought that's available to us that will make us more productive and more innovative. You can't always draw a straight line between the two, but the evidence on that front is clear.
Great, it's great to have your comments through that. Thank you for returning back. I know obviously we know you're extremely busy, but thanks for sharing your commitment.
I'm going to put my children to bed now. They're bouncing off the walls in here.
Thank you. We're going to switch now. Thank you, Mayor, once more. Thank you, Michael, to our second speaker. And our second speaker really contextualizes things as we were fortunate enough to have Emmanuel and Carol Johnson last time. I've asked on this occasion just to talk about the ideation of projects, and also I mentioned that the great Vanley Burke earlier, and that's in the chat. You can get those projects there, and that boy on the bike I forgot to mention is the British Union Jack alongside that beam and smile there. It's an iconic photograph, but also those iconic uses of that and how he used that, and the word called portraiture and developing his projects and very much like as a colleague of mine within the Come Revolution squad as well, someone as well I've worked with at Jima Radio. Great to see this. I wouldn't say they were young when I met them. Great to see this fantastic wealth of talent and generation within the region as well. And his career also stretches into many other different projects, but also his family life and being important. We're talking about Windrush. I've asked him to have just again another facet of that. Welcome, if you will, everybody. Raise your hands for Adam Murray, please. Adam, take it away.
The first thing I want to say is I really love Mina and Michael's work and what they're about to endeavour on. It's quite an incredible project. Mike, we've known each other on and off for about, what, 8 years, I think? And like, whenever I would see Mike, even if we just saw each other briefly, I'd always see him like with the camera or in an environment where we're both trying to find out what's going on. So, like it's pretty amazing to follow up from Michael and Marvin. And what I find really interesting is there's a bit of like a trifactor of experiences between the three of us. So there's a number of different things in our life experiences that we definitely share. But the first thing I want to say straight off the bat is kind of, and Roger had alluded to that, is as a person of African diaspora, African heritage, I'm from a tropical island, or there's no halves in my mixed raceness, which is another really interesting thing. I'm from a tropical island, but I'm not from the Caribbean. So my mum is from Zanzibar, East Africa, and she's from Manyema tribe, which is Bantu Swahili tribe, who originally came from the interior, from the Congo, and then moved to the east coast of Africa. And my dad is mixed race from Cape Town, and his grandfather is mixed from the Khoikhoi tribe, which were the indigenous tribe of the Cape, and that they were called by the Dutch. That's where the derogatory term Hottentot comes from. So that's like my father's side of the family, and he's half Khoikhoi. Yeah, that's exactly it, Victor. And Dutch. And then my mum and dad met, ironically, going to college in Southend. So there's like a really interesting African diaspora story. So also, I'm from Swindon, just down the road from Bristol. I grew up in Swindon, but this is where like some of my story overlaps with both Mike and Marvin as well, which is that whole notion of growing up in a majority white school, and moments sort of inside and outside and away from the extended Black community. So for me, it's like I feel very privileged to be allowed into this conversation, and that the sort of Bristol Black creative family have allowed me into their extended family. And one of the main features of exchange for me is exactly what Mike said, which I think is a very African thing, which is storytelling. You know, that's how and why I certainly got into this, and that's something I deeply share and love about what Mike said, and respect about Mike's approach, which is, for me, all of this is about storytelling, and it comes from the same sort of experiential stories that Marvin and Mike talked about, which is we didn't see ourselves on the television. You know, we were excluded from certain spaces. I mean, my experience was the first time that I could get on a train away from Swindon. Went straight to Bristol. You know, and Bristol was a place I'd be able to buy records, meet other people, and kind of engage with things again, because my family had sort of moved away from London to Swindon. That's where my dad was able to get a decent job. My brother was actually a footballer, but my thing was books, reading books and films. You know, I actually started out, I wanted to be an actor. I did quite well as a kid, but I think very much like Marvin had said before, you have like a shelf life when you're young, and then as soon as you get to a certain age, it's sort of, where can the mainstream position you? So a lot of my experiences have always been about trying to get to a certain place, hitting a glass ceiling and getting locked off. And also this kind of notion, and this is another thing I share and love about Mike as well, which is eventually, as an adult learner, I got back into university. I successfully got into university when I was 18, but things went very wrong. And it's not something I want to talk about here. It's a negative thing, but it's a truthful experience. You know, I encountered a lot of racism on the course, and in the end, I just dropped out. And very much like Mike said, it was around representation, role models, feeling kind of excluded from each experience. So for me, I spent a lot of time, both in life and career-wise, trying to find a place to fit in. And I think it's never too late to engage with things. And as Mike said, the best way to learn is by doing. you know. And I think later on I was very much lucky to be able to study a film degree, and that's kind of like what led me into film. And it's because I'd had these horrible experiences of wanting to be an actor, and then just going through this really horrible experience, and then thinking like, I don't want to be in front of the camera, I want to be behind the camera. And then again, where the trifactor of all of this is back to storytelling. So picking up an SLR, this is before digital, and the film course that I did, it was 50-50. It was like 50 academic film studies and 50 film craft. So my first student film, I was able to work with a group of people, and it was 16mm black and white. So that was really interesting. I think we were like the last year that was able to kind of edit stuff on a flatbed, you know, go through the whole experience of like a shot list, sending in stuff to sort of Soho studios and getting your film back, and just that whole meticulous process of filmmaking. Again, I love what Mike said about you know, pre and post, you know, just going through the process of what takes place on a shoot, you know, from like idea to kind of the edit, and then, you know, hopefully release onto whatever platform it's going on to. But for me, portraiture has played a massive sort of part of finding where I wanted to be in my story. So back to what Marvin and Mike had said about a lack of stories. Portraiture for me isn't just photographic portraiture. I think portraiture and composition also applies to storytelling, in the sense of you can make sonic portraits, which is my sort of technique, how I work with radio. So most of the time what I would do is I'd interview my subject, and I would actually cut my voice out of the edit, so that it seems like a seamless sort of stream of consciousness from the subject. And then in itself it becomes a kind of a more sort of intimate exploration of what that person is about. So more than anything, what sort of led me to where I'm at, even with programming film and writing about film and working in film production, everything for me kind of revolves around that kind of intimate ways to frame individual stories and journeys, how they've got to where they're at and what makes them tick. And that want and need, I think, comes from, I mean, here's another one, like Mike talking about watching Malcolm X for the first time and that connection with Spike Lee. I've talked to Roger about this a number of times. The first time I read Alex Haley's autobiography of Malcolm X, it just hit me hard in the sense of, you know, the biographical and autobiographical. How do we tell people's stories when we don't have a huge reference map of stuff out there to kind of to view? And what I mean, I think that's starting to change now, and Michael is a huge part of that, and a number of other filmmakers and writers and creators are a huge part of that. But I would certainly say for me, it, like in my 20s and teenage years, there's nothing like that out there. So it took me a long time to sort of find my feet and figure out what I wanted to do. And the other thing is sort of straddling a number of different things as well. So I ended up sort of casting my net wide to kind of bring it back into what discipline I would eventually find myself in. And again, right now, I think that's evolving and changing. So I think my focus more than ever now is around sort of sonic portraiture and writing about film. And I write about film from a kind of experiential position. Yeah, I mean, Roger, you might want to sort of jump in and sort of help me to kind of, because it sounds a bit vague on the surface, but really for me, it's been a long journey of trial and error to figure out where you end up. And like the biggest part of that for me is like, stay open. Research is one of the most important things. You know, be eclectic. don't be afraid to take chances and like open up your parameters
Well,
to,
you've
to
said
what
the
you're
things that I was
what you're
going to
taking
say.
in.
That's what I admire about your work. So, well, and why I particularly want, because you're good at ideation and what you describe as portraiture in terms of getting that idea, and that's what we're asking our students now to kind of weave
Yeah,
this into
I think Roger, it's a really good experience, because you've got someone like Marvin who is just like, he is like a magic bullet of oratorial excellence, and then you've got Mike, who's very matter of fact and articulate and kind of can be very specific, and then you've got me, and the way I talk is a bit kind of dreamy and loose, but my notion is like that's where the big ideas come from. Like I've got a favorite sort of David Lynch quote, and he would one of his sort of favorites is about the fish in the river, and the longer you wait, the bigger the fish you'll catch. So where some people will be a kind of like, get on top of that idea really quickly and go for it. I'm the sort of creative dude that will say it's also okay to kind of procrastinate, research a bit, read around the subject. Also, that doesn't mean don't strike while the iron is hot, which I thought was an excellent piece of advice from Mike as well, because I mean I think he gave us a really sobering and honest insight into the way production companies work. They're pitching and pitching and pitching and pitching, and you're just waiting for the right one to land, and then you start going into the process of getting that project together. But I'm an idea, you know me, I'm an ideas man.
Yeah,
I like
exactly. So let's talk about two ideas that you've put into action. In terms of, let's start with the some of the recent films your film club that you've made in terms of horror. So that's an idea that you've had. That's a love and a passion of yours. How have you what's the mechanics of getting that into actual action?
So we're getting close. We've got like a logo and stuff. Don't know whether you guys can see that, but we're almost there. So there's like,
so what is
we're
it?
at the point.
How did you? I know you love films, but how did you manage to get that in there?
Oh, and Blade T-shirt. So it's almost like we're almost there. And again, what Mike mentioned earlier, we've talked in passing about this for years and years and years, and like I'm hoping that I'll be able to get a chat with Mike at some point to talk some horror ideas, because I certainly want him to be on board with what I'm doing. And if I can, and again, this back to that collaborative. Oh yes, please, Mike. Back to that collaborative thing. Just kind of like keeping these conversations, keeping it moving, keeping it open, and this is how we build. And I think what Mike and Mina are about to do, which is sort of also have a real physical space. Oh wow, it's that kind of like pulling the ideas out of the sky and making it real and making it concrete. And we all know that is an incredibly difficult thing to do. So I reckon we're about 2 weeks away from launching Bristol Black Horror Club, which is going to be just a kind of a very laid back, fun platform to kind of explore the horror genre. And I, in the midst, I think, of like an Afro-American boom of black horror, but I think most importantly a global and diasporic boom of black horror. I mean, Roger, we've been talking about the fantastic film that was on Netflix, His House, right? Which is magnificent. So I think that, and there's already a number of UK short films which are in production as well. And this came about. It's an idea I've had for quite some time. I've been kind of like a horror fanatic from a kid, really. And again, like Mike was saying, it's back to that some of the things that he relies heavily on, which is kind of like I can't remember the name of the website that he referenced, but I'm constantly looking at images and ideas and thinking about what connects and what fits together. And just over like over a number of years, I was like, well, it actually came out of something way back before Come the Revolution came about, which was a brilliant collaboration that I was able to work on with Edson Burton Watershed, which was the Afrofuturism season. It's certainly like how I met Roger around this sort of time, met a number of different heads in Bristol around that period of time. And even then I was sort of thinking like, oh, black horror, you know, this is something I really want to sort of explore and talk about. In the States, there's Afro-American academic and novelist called Tanana Reeve Dew, and I've admired her work for years. And just sort of at the beginning of lockdown, I mean, before I've been working with a kind of collaborative networking skills group at Watershed called Beyond Boundaries, which was an incredibly sort of open and enriching platform to exchange ideas and develop ideas. So I'd sort of been cooking up this idea for about a year before, I'd say sort of like beginning of 2019, but I've been thinking about it for 5 years, alongside the kind of Afrofuturism thing. And then kind of lockdown hit, and everyone was kind of in kind of like fallout and turmoil and thinking like, and as a freelancer, you immediately sort of think, how the hell am I going to survive? And I think this is where sort of doing the work and being out there and engaging with different things that are happening within your creative community really lands. So I've met this amazing woman who actually runs the BFI DVDs at films, you know, selling the stall for DVDs and Blu-rays for film festivals. She happened to be at a film festival at Watershed, and I'd gone to pick up a box set of early Afro-American cinema. So big up Mike again, and this is where the reference of Birth of a Nation comes back around again, because I've been talking to another film programmer about both Birth of a Nation and the early films of Oscar Micheaux. So I was like, right, I've got to go and get that BFI box set disc. So I go over to the stall and I start talking to this incredible woman behind the counter, and we just hit it off. And then a colleague kind of comes up and goes, "You're going to be late. You're introducing a film in a minute." And she kind of happened to say, like, "Oh, I didn't know you were involved in ABCD. I'm actually going to go and watch your introduction to that film and watch that film now." And we exchanged cards afterwards. She was like, "Oh, cool intro." And then literally in a moment of absolute sort of desperation of like, I've got to do horror club, COVID's hit, how am I going to do this? You know, how are these things all going to connect? And just out of the blue, this lady contacts me and asks me if I want to be involved for a BFI Blu-ray box set of Tales from the Hood 1 and 2, which is sort of like a cult 90s black horror film. It happens to be directed by a dude that very much reminds me of Mike in a lot of different ways. So that's a conversation we've got to have at a later stage, Mike. And his name is Rusty Kundiev. And along with Spike and a number of directors during the 90s, they were kind of like, ironically, like Mike Amina's name for the company, like Black Wave, they were part of a kind of a second Black Wave of filmmaking. And then just after that, you get kind of like the Hughes brothers with kind of Dead Presidents, Menace to Society, and those kinds of movies. But Rusty was kind of at the cusp of this moment. And Tales from the Hood was literally meant to be like a homage to like the Amicus horror films of the 60s and 70s, and the Hammer anthology films. You know, you'd have like a wraparound at the beginning and the end, but you'd have like 4 or 5 different spooky stories. But he wanted to make, you know, socially conscious black stories, because his notion is like, you know, black existence is horror, and we need to tell our stories. And he also goes all the way back and cites, just as Michael did earlier, Birth of a Nation, because it's a horror movie.
Okay.
For us, it's a horror film.
I want to just talk about some of those projects, also the use of image in your work, and how important that is in terms of capturing the moment of both history and again, leading on for or future generations. How has that kind of influenced the kind of your work, both as a photographer and filmmaker?
Well, I would think I would think Mike is an infinitely better photographer and cinematographer than me, but photography for me helps me to capture a mood, helps me to visualize a story, and particularly if I'm working on portraiture with sound, which is something I'm doing a lot often. There's another guy I'm collaborating with at the moment, who's part of a Bristol-based collective called Common Thread, and one of the things we're working on at the moment, a Common Hand collective. There's a body of work that we're working on called Common Thread, which is kind of different ways of creating portraits of creative folks. And for me, it's about talking to creative people and asking them about their journey, you know, what makes you tick and how, and then kind of accompanying their voice, more often than not, with their images that they've collected, particularly if they're film or photographic practitioners, which in itself is like a form of, I don't know, it's kind of, we've started to call them like audio visual portraits, but really it's a very simplified shorthand documentary form of storytelling. For example, like a short piece I worked with the same guy, you probably this is the poster for it. It was a film called Instant Surf. There's a guy, a surfer from Devon, who's one of the only, I think he's a handful of UK surf photographers that uses Polaroid and instant film, and he even builds his own cameras and stuff. And that idea was to kind of make a portrait of what he does with film. So yeah, I think all of my sort of creative expression is around facilitating creatives to tell their story, if you know what I mean. It's kind of like an odd thing, but I suppose where it comes from is this kind of idea of wanting to know how to do it, which is something that sort of Mike had mentioned earlier, which is like you want to be able to hear from your peers. So in my head, I'm always like, wouldn't it be great if there's a website you can kind of click on that website and you've got interviews with people that you admire or that you kind of wonder, how did they get there, what was their journey, and you could have that as a resource. And that's kind of like what I'm about in that sense, you know. So I would say that the same with kind of cables and cameras. That's been my kind of ongoing contribution with those guys, but that's more of like as a doing what you're doing, instead of being the subject, being the kind of host and kind of
talk to our audience a little about cables and cameras, please.
Okay, so Cables and Cameras is a film networking platform created by Gary Thompson, who is a UWE alumni. Yes, yeah. He is. Thank you, Charlotte. And yeah, Gary's a really interesting dude. I think he just got incredibly frustrated by just seeing a vacuum of spaces where you can kind of engage and feel comfortable to talk to other Black and brown creatives about what you do and how you do it. I mean, I think Gary would say initially it's a space for Black and brown filmmakers, but I think if you're a writer or like if you are a creative, a Black or brown creative, and you want to be able to be in a space where you can watch or share your own work and watch other people's short films, you can come along. There's a program of short films, and then afterwards there's usually like a focus on a local filmmaker or a guest from a different part of the country, talking about what they do, how they've got there, and what their experience has been. And I think that's been an incredibly successful platform. I certainly have been able to meet loads of incredible people via that strand.
And also part of your narrative,
Mike's been a guest as well.
Also part of your narrative is Come Revolution as well as part of your portfolios. You've got BFI, you've got cables and cameras. Talk to us a little bit more about the Come Revolution Collective and how important that's been. You mentioned in terms about how you get these things together, so collaborative.
Incredibly,
that as well.
Incredibly important. I just think having two things. To be able, I mean, like Mike would be able to talk on this as well, but there was a certain point where Watershed, you wouldn't say was the most comfortable space to be able to walk into when you were kind of younger. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit kind of like, is it okay to be in here? You know, it reeks of kind of upper middle class sophistication, but I would say over the years the Watershed has destroyed, I think, a lot of those sort of cliched notions, and is taking it seriously and attempting to kind of change the space into a more inclusion and diverse space. And I think the experience of being a part of Come Revolution for 8 years, that's how I met Roger. I mean, we'd met a little bit before that, but it felt as if to me so many of these different things seemed to happen. It was like a sort of a thunderbolt of creative energy and lots of different people doing different things and really going for it. And I just remember being invited into this group and working with Roger, Dr. Edson Burton, Liz Chege, who's now in Edinburgh, Jaslyn Pinkney, Ian Sargent from Birmingham. Who else, Roger? It was just like an incredible body of people, and then we were able to kind of collaborate, you know, from that sort of nucleus of us guys initially. We were able to kind of like start approaching people and saying, why can't we screen this film? Can we talk about this? How about we invite guests to you know? So it just felt like at the time, it just felt like this amazing moment where finally we were able to kind of open things out a bit. So I mean, where that goes next, I don't know. But
goes to some of my next questions. I'm going to ask you the same question that Charlotte asked to you shortly. So if people can start getting their questions ready, that'd be great. But I wanted to just touch upon some of your key themes. Again, gone through the struggle in your own way. You talked about the kind of African diaspora, and you didn't mention your mum's engagement with Windrush Generation.
NHS, obviously, and I think like both for my mum and like my dad's an educator. And my mum has worked in a number of different capacities. She's worked in secondary schools. But she's worked for the NHS for a number of years, and I think it's just camaraderie in blackness, camaraderie in diasporic African heritage. Absolutely. Is incredibly important. And I feel as if, you know, the Windrush struggle highlights one of the most important moments of the importance and significance of African Caribbean culture in the United Kingdom, and how we've collectively made our mark on the United Kingdom, which is irreversible and is part of the country's culture, and then also diasporically opens out the great injustices of what's taking place.
And it really channels the two. I mean, you know, we're moving out from Windrush to the kind of the Black British experience. What's that? Then we get a man like Steve McQueen come along and encompass that both in the US via Africa, and obviously is the 5 film opus that is made for Mangrove and Education, the Small Acts series, which to us is like catnip and gold dust. But I'm old. That should have been there a long time ago. He's my age.
We didn't have these films. We didn't have these films when we were young. So it's I think it's hard to kind of explain this to a much younger generation. You know, I'm in my 40s now, so I'm young, but I'm getting on a bit. But I'm old enough to remember what Marvin was talking about the 1980s and what that felt like, because that was real deal. And some of those experiences that Marvin was talking about, being run out of places and certain things that, know that one off by heart. And it's kind of so it's interesting to be able to sort of explain to a younger generation how exciting it is that they're born into this frightening moment of COVID and this frightening moment of kind of culture wars, but they're also kind of birthed into this incredibly impressive make or break moment where that you can go for it, and there's a platform of people out there who want to see young black and brown creatives succeed. You know,
absolutely.
I mean, like certainly for me, it's always about, like Mike said, it's never really about money. You know, if you can pay the bills, keep a roof over your head, then you're doing really well. You know, but really it's about storytelling. And then also for me, I think there's a legacy thing, which is like, I think of all the people that have helped me. You've helped me, Roger, specifically. Edson has helped me specifically. I think of a number of people. Ian Sargent has helped me specifically with networking and all kinds of different opportunities. And it's kind of, and I just think of an amazing art curator and programmer and just all round incredible human being, Karen Alexander. And just to quote her very quickly, it's, yes, connections are so important. You know, what she says, which is kind of like, do the work, legacy, give something back. That's how you build a scene, a culture. Do you know what I mean? And then, as Marvin said, you know, like, own the IP. So I mean, this is why, like, Horror Club, it's me and my brother doing this. It's a lifelong dream for both of us to do something just very small, you know, but it's black owned. And then also, you know, want to be able to collaborate with lots of different people and open it out. I mean, it's kind of an upsetting thing, which is my friend Tasha Williams was going to be my kind of like partner in crime on the Black Horror thing, but you know, she passed away at Christmas, so I'm not going to be able to share that with her. And I was just saying to her partner the other day, like, we were ready to rock and roll. So again, like Mike had said, don't wait, build and make it happen. And, you know, like I'd said to her partner, like, we're going to make her really proud with this, because she was going to be part of this family. I thank you, Charlotte. And Tasha had, as Charlotte knows, you know, Tasha was very active, Cinema Rediscovered, Bath Film Festival, the Cube Cinema, and her time was just about to happen. And so many of us in different networks could see that, and we're kind of going, yes, you know, get Tasha up into the next moment. So life is too short.
Okay, Adam, thank you so much. You talked about the support, the ideas, collaboration being important in your career, getting those ideas into action. We've kind of touched upon your research being vital in that. Having the courage to start something kind of different, be eclectic. You mentioned the Black Film Club being part of that. You work with BFI, you work with Watershed. So there's partnership models with other models. What we now know is decolonizing space. We didn't know that when we kind of started off. That's in the headlines of reclaiming those spaces. And obviously, Mike's doing that with the docs, and and bringing those waters in. So I'm going to put you on I'm going to bring Michael back shortly for any comments he's got in response to what Adam said. But I'm going to ask you what Charlotte's question: teaching filmmaking. How can we reach out to prospective students to come and be the change makers we need for the film industry?
In my personal experience, because this is usually how that's how I roll. My whole thing is kind of like experiential reaction to things. I would say personally, at 18, I won't say the name of the institution, and also it doesn't actually exist anymore. But I went to what was considered then a progressive art school, and it was a university course, and I think it was theatre and performance art. And I had the most horrific experience going to that institution. Suffered a huge amount of racism, made a handful of incredible friends that have been friends for life, but only because they experienced similar things, and kind of dropped out, walking away from higher education thinking I worked so hard to get there, then to kind of feel as if like I've worked hard to get to this place where I'm not wanted. And then eventually, after kind of exploring lots of different avenues, and saving money and working really hard, ended up on a film course. The reason why I was able to get through that film course, and this is just my personal experience, is because it was a mixed academic team. And on that team, and I have to say this, it was 90% women, and I would say possibly 50% LGBT, and then kind of, I think it was like 20% black and brown. But I think,
do you mean mixed by diversity? Just to clarify.
Mixed by, yeah. You know, and not that great, but I think because it was led in a particular way, the subject matter was open. Also, it was one of the, I think it was one of the last years that did a module which was actually called Black and Asian Film. And this is a story I told Karen Alexander much later, which is like, there's one of the things I'd used for like an undergrad essay, she recited in it. So like, all those years later, ending up like being mentored by her as we were at the time, and sort of working with her, it's like, holy, you know. And again, that sort of, what I'm trying to say there is, number one, it shows how few of us are in these fields. Number two, it also shows it's a small community of people, of academics, creatives, and people that contributed to the history of the Black British experience. So for me, it's like, I think all the things that have come up so far, role models, because that's really what inspired me to continue on this journey, even sometimes when you think I just want to give up. It is kind of like stories, role models, to be seen, to be heard. I think that's really it. I think it's about, if you can talk to other creatives who are kind of like there on the other side of your journey, and then sort of as a student you're able to see how that relates into what you're doing. I think that shapes a lot of the experience. I mean, I know that just like having the Black and Asian Film module at the time was so important. Yeah, and having visiting speakers, because afterwards you'd and this is when I don't smoke tobacco anymore, but it's like you go and have a cigarette, and I try and approach, you know, one of the guest speakers and sort of say, you know, like, actually, I really want to ask you this about this, and this is what I mean. It's like none of these conversations, and I graduated a number of years back, but even then those conversations weren't happening. You'd have to create those experiences.
Okay, thank you so much, Adam. We've got a lot there in terms of those, even that last batch and stories and role models and black filmmakers, alongside the other key things you mentioned about support and research and collaboration and those connections. Mike, you were cited quite a lot in that, and obviously you worked with Adam. Any response or comments of your own choosing?
No, I
Thank
think
you, Tom.
yeah, I mean, just hearing your story, Adam, there was just amazing. So I definitely want to get a copy of this recording if I can, Roger. But yeah, no, that was really, really deep, Adam. And yeah, I just share your love for horror, and I'm really excited for what your horror film club is going to do, and I really want to get involved. And yeah, just just perseverance, and perseverance. I guess that is like the message I'm getting from that's your story, persevering through, at those different stages in your life. So yeah, really powerful, man. And
Absolutely, Mike. I just want to widen that out to you, because we have normally we talk all things. Adam and I still keep in touch, but you've been busy and I've been busy. Normally we get a chance to talk about things like the Steve McQueen films and the small acts. But I wanted not to talk about the quality of that. I suppose that's subjective for another day. But what's that going to do to kind of change the industry? That black experience built on that Windrush generation, the stories of a black policeman, the stories of the mangrove, the stories of education, which is based on the Rampton Report from 1981, and him himself being sent to remedial school, a man who's been knighted. Now a Turner Prize was sent to remedial school, built on his life. The story of the Brixton Riots. What's that doing to change the industries in terms of you? Because you're both producer and filmmaking. How does that change the game, if you like?
I mean, quickly, I think if hearing these stories is going to be crucial if we want the wider population to have a better understanding of the black community and what it's contributed to this country, to this nation, and to the world, and the struggles and the perseverance, and of what's happened throughout the ages, needs to be shown so people have a better understanding, because they're not reading it. They're not reading it. It's not in the textbooks. It's not being given like that. So the next best thing, and the way that people nowadays, youngers nowadays, are consuming information is through video. So I feel like it's even now more important to be producing these stories through using the medium of film to actually to do it, because you're more likely to get those eyeballs to watch it and to experience it and to feel it. Most importantly is to feel it.
Right.
Yeah, that's.
And NEA has backed up both of what you're saying in terms of it's crucial that people like yourselves as guest speakers who come in and worked in the industry more than 10 years, students can see a career that's been carved out across different industries. There's concern that jobs in the media and heritage, etc., are difficult to get into and make a living at. Well, that's certainly the narrative. No one told me I could get paid for talking a lot, either lecturing or on a broadcasting. I was worked in the building sites, so that just was not an option to me. So that's why it's so vital. We've got this Windrush legacy, because we've extended that out to Adam today and across the African Diaspora. Our next event will be next week, where we'll continue to look at our heritage. It will be Latoya McAllister from St. Paul's Carnival. We're hoping a few of the community speakers will join her and her journey within both health and housing, but also as a director of St. Paul's Carnival and what that's brought to us, and also the challenges that's brought in COVID, being a digital director. And both of you have worked on the St. Paul's Carnival and aware of the challenges in terms of both filming and running those events. So we're looking forward to seeing that. Any final questions for anybody before I go to our speakers and close? Adam, final comments, please.
Final comment. I think it's like show and prove. Don't give up. Take risks. Learn from mistakes. like Mike is one of my personal heroes, right? So, and like as I said like earlier, it's like the first couple of times I met Mike, I'd always be like, Mike, what are you up to? What's going? You know, we'd always kind of go like, oh, I'm thinking about working on this, da da da. I mean, it's like I always feel he inspires me, and I hope the feeling is kind of like a mutual kind of thing. And I think it's like the more and more we build these platforms, they're like little archipelagos, little islands, and the whole idea is to seed these things. And like Marvin said, it's like if we can own a couple of these things, the more people that create these beautiful islands of cultural exploration and creativity, that then all of our tribes are on the map, right?
Excellent. Michael, final words, please.
Exactly. I never mean cheese. That was real talk, man. I don't know how I'm going to come. I mean, yeah, that was deep. And yeah, I just want to echo what you're saying, Adam. You know, things that you do, things that Roger does, things that Marvin does. I mean, it's something that I look up to as a creative in the city. And like, it's so important that we are visible as well, especially doing something like this for the university students. It's so important that they can see us and be visible and see that there's other ways into this industry, or you know, be inspired to create their own industry. I mean, why not? So yeah, I just want to thank you, Roger, for getting me involved in this, and it's great to, you know, speak with, you know, people from the University of West of England, and yeah, and I would just say to everybody, my main advice would be to any student: go and get a diary, a paper diary, not a digital one, old school paper diary. Use that. That will change your life. It changed my life, and that is the sorts of, you know, simple little steps that you need to make in order to get somewhere in this industry. Being on time, that's very important. So getting a diary is going to be key. So yeah, thank you so much, and yeah, just stay in touch through social media. I posted my social media stuff, and you can see when I release films and when more things happening. So thank you.
Great stuff, and we look forward to the a celebration for your a proper celebration for a Black Wave. I want to thank you both, my former nephews, because you were kind of young up and coming, but now I'm proud to call you my brothers, because you're of that age, and you're now ready to give back to that next generation. I want to thank Mian Nang, I want to thank Alicia Area, Tom, Luis Go as well, everybody at UE who's supported it, my team, Izzy, Ben, Millie, Nisha as well, Chloe has volunteered and doing some work for us as well, and Sadilla and Chantel as well. And people like, I always like to bring people who like, from years ago, James Hall Patterson is another person who's helped me in idealization of this project. The final words today will be from Michael's fellow Dominican from the Windrush. We're delighted she was on the call. Did ask her that she wanted a few words, which she just wanted to listen today, and she's going to send us all off with these final words. Continue to be authentic and truly believe in your stories. Some people may not think they are important, but don't be influenced by that. You have power in your stories. Continue to be inspired. Thank you both for putting on this event, and that's both as in you both, Adam Mazur, and all of us. There's loads of things in the chat. Follow us on Twitter, Roger G44. We will make more links. Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you, everybody. We're finishing on time.
Thank you.